Hey guys, this is Yoda. In this video, I'm going to give my take on Blizzard recently buffing tank threat by 15%. Basically, a lot of players have been complaining about threat issues in Raid and in Mythic Plus, and a hotfix has been applied that hopefully Blizzard thinks will solve the problem. Tank threat has been buffed by 15%. It will definitely help in Mythic Plus. In Raid, I don't see really how it's going to do anything because the other tank's threat is also getting buffed, so I don't really see how you're going to, this is going to help anything with that. I would say one thing that would help with tank threat in Raid is that right now tank damage is heavily weighted into hero trees, and I have some logs that will show to go over that. So if you have like your hero talent button up, you're suddenly going to do way more damage than if you don't have it. So if your rotation involves using that earlier or later, or if you just like are slacking and you use it later, then oftentimes that can create a threat issue or a threat rip, even if the other tank is playing properly or normally. This is going to do absolutely nothing to address that. One thing that would address that, however, would be shifting a little bit more of the tank's damage into things that they can control, as in like using their spenders more, which right now, as we'll show, is basically completely irrelevant, especially compared to previous seasons. So I'm going to look at two Floodgate logs. The one is my Warriors, and one is the rank 1 log right now. This is the fastest run of Floodgate currently done on live servers. PH does an 85 for the key level, 99 for the key. Everyone's doing big damage. As you can see, he's doing less than half of the lowest damage dealer by quite a bit, and if you look at the top damage dealer, it's actually more like 1/3. So I would say tank damage is really in an unhealthy state right now. It's an indicator that tank damage is too low when DPS are constantly pulling threat, like mid-pull, and the hotfix that Blizzard has to add is that they buff the threat. They don't buff the tank damage. I think at this point, it is too late in the season to buff tank's damage because you would, everyone have to redo all the keys or whatever. So I think that's a little bit too much to ask for this season, but in season 3, I really would like Blizzard to hopefully increase damage done by tanks in particular. Actually, first we're going to go over the other log. So the other log is my Warrior. No Warrior has ever done this much damage in this key, and definitely not on this key level. However, I'm doing less than half of the lowest damage dealer in damage. If we look at previous seasons, so this is a Black Cold from season 3 Dragonflight, which is when I would say the game was pretty healthy. I'm doing pretty good damage, and it's about half of the top damage dealer. Whereas if you look at this log, it's less than half of the lowest damage dealer and more like 30% of the top damage dealer. So tank damage has definitely gone significantly lower. Also, side note, my healer is actually doing big damage too, almost doing half of what my damage is. If you look at this log, Resto Shaman doing less than a quarter, Oracle Priest doing like a 10th. Hopefully they do something about that too. Healer damage is also like in a really bad state right now, especially with Oracle Priest being meta. The tank damage, especially, in season 3, it was a lot higher and made tanks way more fun. One thing that WoW has always suffered from, especially in Mythic Plus, is a tank and healer shortage. Support roles just have less people that want to play them, and a big reason for that, especially right now, is that their damage contribution is pathetically low. People watch, top tank streams, and they see, oh look, this guy is supposedly really good at tank, but he's doing no damage. I don't want that to be me, so I won't play tank. A lot of people, think this way. So if Blizzard increases tank damage, then more likely more people will play tank, and the game will be healthier. All right. Anyway, another thing to focus on is where this damage gap is actually coming from. So let's look at the first pull of this dungeon. Remember what I said? I was doing like less than half of the lowest damage dealer? Well, actually, in this pull, the first pull, a big AoE pull, it actually is more like 1/3 or less than 1/3 of the lowest, and it's more like 1/6. I have to like 1/4. It's 1/4. Sorry, I can't do math. Between 1/4 and 1/5 of the top damage dealer. This is where the damage is really lacking, the AoE damage. And if you look at my damage breakdown for this pull, it's actually 18% of it is just one button. The one demolish I push when they're all grouped. Also, if they're actually not grouped when I push this demolish, then, whatever I don't hit with this demolish is missing 18% of my damage. So obviously I can't hold threat on it because I'm doing no damage to it. 20% of my damage is a passive dot that gets applied when I thunderclap. So what about actual spenders? Buttons that I, have to optimize my gameplay in order to use. Well, that's Revenge. 15 presses, but it does 13.79% of my damage, which is like less than 1% of the group's total damage. So even if I push 0 Revenge, we're basically not being held back at all in this pull. It doesn't generate much threat, and it also does no damage. Hopefully, one thing Blizzard does is they buff abilities like Revenge. For instance, similar abilities would be Spirit Bomb for Demon Hunter, Raise for Bear, which they don't even play right now because it's so bad. does no damage. Another ability like this would be, I guess for Death Knight, right now they don't even have an AoE spender, but they've never had one. Their spender is Death Strike, which only hits one target. Hopefully they implement something where maybe Death Strike could hit multiple targets, or just some way for Death Knights to like optimize their rotation to do more AoE damage. But right now, basically, the spenders that you use, for instance, let's look at this guy's first pull. The spenders that tanks use, also doing, you know, less than a third, by the way. I'm gonna translate this. The damage that tanks do with their spenders is very low. This Soul Cleave 30% is misleading. 24% is Fury of the Eldrachi, which is just using your hero talent. Soul Cleave, which is his only spender, is actually only doing 6% of his total damage. And we don't even play Spirit Bomb right now because it also does no damage. So one thing I'm really hoping for Blizzard to do, I'll just reiterate it, is to increase the damage of these spenders. Revenge, Raise, Maul, Spirit Bomb, etc. Maybe give some other classes AoE. If you look at my damage breakdown from this Season 3 log, it's much more healthy, I would hope. Yeah, Spirit Bomb is doing 21% compared to Soul Cleave, which is 6%. So like almost 30% of my damage is from these spenders. If you look at the first pull, it's a bit worse. Actually, I don't even use Spirit Bomb in this pull, which is kind of crazy. But it's still 15% from Soul Cleave, whereas this guy's Soul Cleave is 6%. So in my opinion, these abilities, these spenders, could be significantly buffed, especially the AoE ones. And tank damage and healer damage are also in an extremely unhealthy state. Fixing tank threat will like make it feel a little bit better on live, maybe in keys. We'll do nothing in raid. But the greater problem right now is that tank damage is extremely low. Basically, the disease is that tank damage is extremely low, and they're treating the symptoms, they're not treating the actual disease.